And welcome back to episode number 48 of Raise the Banner. I don't know who any Patriots player or who's number 48? Was Jacob Johnson 48?
Jakob Johnson was 48. I can't say his first name. Is it Tavai? Tavai's number is 48.
Okay, there you go. All right, so it's a Tavai show.
I immediately went to Pablo Sandoval. I don't know why.
Anyways, welcome back. We're at episode number 48 of Raise the Banner podcast. It's Benny Ballgame and myself, Macator, tonight. JR's at work. Zach's at the Red Sox tonight. So it's just the two of us. But we do have a jam-packed schedule. And by jam-packed, I mean just a lot of Patriots football. The season starts off on Sunday. We saw game one last night with the Chiefs and Ravens. I hate to kind of like just compare it, like all the kind of mini type of breaks that the Pats got over their dynasty. I just feel like the Chiefs, like literally a big toe. Like they were a big toe away from like I guess 50-50 chance of roughly winning or losing.
Yeah, because it goes to overtime at that point.
Well, the Ravens were going for two. Harbaugh yelled out 2-2-2 right after the touchdown. So I think they were going to go for two, which would have then put things a lot more, I guess, dramatic. What is this? Is someone normal?
Yeah, I feel like who did that? There was a meaningful game. I think it was a college game. Some team had it wasn't like a like a North Dakota State type. Not that they're bad; they're a great FCS program, but it was like a lesser D1 school that hadn't beaten like a ranked team like ever, and they decided to go for two at the end of the game to try to knock off Alabama instead of force overtime, and they didn't get it.
I think I vaguely I know what game you're talking about. I forget off the top of my head who it was, but
yeah.
All right, yeah. Anyways, let's jump into the Patriots. Obviously, we got week one on Sunday and in a couple days now. Jacoby Brissett is your quarterback. Before we get into kind of overall vibes, I want to run down through kind of some accolade award predictions that you would give based off of the team itself, the players itself. Obviously, just the Patriots and not league wide. Let's kind of just start off with Defensive Player of the Year. Who do you kind of predict by the end of the year you'll be saying, they had not so much the best season, but most valuable, best overall defensive season for the Patriots.
So I think that, and I'll add the caveat that I think he will have the best season. I mean, hard to really compare the stats because obviously it's not apples to apples when you compare people who play different positions. But I think Keon White is primed for a breakout season. He looked really good in camp. He looked really good in the preseason. And I don't want to say there's pressure on him, but there is a little bit to kind of step up. And just from what I've seen, he just looks primed to break out and take a big step forward. He flashed a little last year, but he looks primed for a great year. And I know I said hard to compare. If Christian Gonzalez goes on to have a great season, it's like, well, what defines a better year for a cornerback when you're comparing him to a defensive end? Obviously, that's hard. But I think, objectively speaking or subjectively speaking, Keon White will have the best year, and I think he'll be your Defensive Player of the Year / defensive MVP.
All right. Yeah, I mean, I like it. He's definitely up there. I do expect a year two jump from him. I'm pretty optimistic of his game. I think he's one of those players that will slowly develop into a really rock solid player for the Patriots. So, I mean, I certainly hope you're right, because if that means if he's in that talk, then things are progressing along the D line after losing Judon and Barmore, obviously to injury, I guess you could say. For me,
he doesn't look like he's going to play this year. They're preparing for him to not play.
Yeah. I mean, I would expect when it happened, I basically was all right. He's probably out for the year. Those situations take like a minimum of 6 weeks, but a lot of them are like minimum 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, this kind of screams like a repeat of what happened with David Andrews a few years ago.
Yeah, we misses a season and he's back. So hey, as long as he's back, obviously he's a long-term piece. I do like, and we could get into it in a little bit, that Kraft's paying for his whole salary instead of, because they're not technically required to, because he's on the non-injury football list rather than
Yes.
the IR. But anyways, I'm gonna go, and I say this is maybe a little bit more of a safe pick, but I'm gonna go Jonathan Tavai. I don't think that he's a guy that typically amazes you with his play, but after last year, I mean, he was arguably their best defensive player last year. The dude was just rock solid game in and game out. He's improved against the pass. He's great against the run. He's great over the middle. And so I'm just kind of, I guess, going with a little bit of a safe pick and knowing that I think he's going to play some really good football. And I believe they're going to be a little bit more aggressive this year, especially blitzing, going after the quarterback. And not that they'll necessarily use him specifically in that role, but he could also rack up an extra couple sacks if they use him in that scenario as well. So,
It's a good pick, though.
how about How about offensive player of the year? Where are you going with that?
Yikes. I feel like I won't. No, I guess I'll be a little aggressive. I won't go with the safe pick, and I'll go with Jalen Polk. Looks really, really good. Good game day speed type of player. I know it's kind of like a cliche thing to say, but plays faster in pads. Has enough agility and shiftiness to break tackles in the open field. Great hands. I think that one of the catchphrases during the draft was that he was an inaccurate passer's, like, what did he say? He would eliminates like inaccuracy problems in quarterbacks because of his catch radius. And obviously this is due in large part to the fact that they have no legitimate offensive weapon. So it's the path to him being that type of player on offense is certainly shorter than it would be, if you had said, who's the best receiver of the 2014 Patriots? Well, you had options to choose from, legitimate options to choose from. But I think that, he's certainly primed for a good year. I think him and Brissett, him and May have a good rapport. Things don't look super great for a guy like Javon Baker. Paul Perillo seems to think he's not going to be out there early because of some on and off field issues. So more opportunities for him. We'll see what kind of opportunities he gets on Sunday. But I think it's Polk. Like the safe pick for me would be like Ramondre Stevenson. Given the lack of offensive skill positions, it's easy just to, you can hand the ball for him. I think he's ripe for pretty close to 1,000 yards rushing. If Gibson stays healthy, I don't know how many yards he'll get out of the passing game, but for me, it's Polk.
All right. Yeah, I mean, Polk is definitely up there. I know one of my state your take moments from 2 or 3 weeks ago that I thought he could get up over 1,000 yards this year. The reality is he's going to have a lot of playing time. Likely, he's going to get a lot of targets, so that's going to end up in a lot of opportunity to kind of highly produce for this team and this offense. I kind of, when I was thinking about this earlier, was stuck between two guys, and one's kind of the more easy answer, which was Demario Douglas. I think he's going to have a really, really good year if he can stay healthy, because I think he's just really, really good. Dude just gets open. He's quick. He's fast. He's explosive. He's very difficult to cover. So it's definitely, he's a little bit more of a safe pick. But
what do you think of a stat line for him?
I think he could realistically go for like 80, 85 catches in like 1,100 yards, something like that. And again, like that 85 catches, sounds like they're going to have to throw the ball to someone.
Right.
And if we believe this offense is going to be at least serviceable, and by serviceable, I mean like not a train wreck like the last year,
Yeah.
someone's going to have to put up numbers. So, we'll see if Brissett if the quarterbacks all combined throw for 4,000 yards this year, like someone's going to rack up those numbers. So, it's going to be someone. But I do want to also give love and to put this as an offensive player of the year. They would never win this in an actual award, but I think that we might come out of this season and say that Layden Robinson was the I don't want to say best offensive player. And yes, I know it's not like an exciting name because it's not
No,
a skill position
you know
player.
what I attribute that? That's like bunting in baseball. That is not a sexy pick.
Yes, I know it's not because you don't give offensive linemen like the offensive player of the year award. It goes to a skill position. Again, like I think we both
Is
agree
he
that
projected to
Stevenson.
start?
Yes. Oh, Stevenson's going to be starting. There seems to be the belief is he'll be at right guard, and when it will be at right tackle, and they're going to either go with Jordan or Leverett at left guard.
Okay.
I had heard, I think it was Phil Perry said he thinks it will be Leverett because Leverett, like his career is at left guard. He's been practicing exclusively at center throughout training camp, but he came into the season into the year as playing left guard in previous years.
Okay.
So, again, it's not a sexy pick, but Layden Robinson, like he's shown that I think he can be an immediate contributor. And if he can be an anchor, if he can be solid on that right guard spot, that what we're going to get from Onwenu. Like, combine what we know we'll get from Onwenu. If he can be that solid at right guard, it will help the O-line tremendously as a whole because that at least tells Mayo and AVP and Scott Peters and even Brissett or May, whoever's playing quarterback, that right side isn't going to be some type of disaster. And
Right.
so if the left side is going to be the weakness, they can chip over, they can help with whoever's at tackle, whether it's Lowe, Chucks, Wallace, whatever it may be. So again, it's an unsexy pick. Like you said, it's kind of like a bunting in baseball pick, which hey, we're both small ball baseball coaches. So,
Yes.
so
Don't give away my secrets.
yeah, this is right up your alley of a pick that you should like. Layden Robinson for offensive player of the year. It sounds gross on paper, but
yeah, for what it's worth, you talked about Douglas. So Sleeper projects him to have 63 catches for 693 yards and 4 touchdowns. And that's the
600. If he stays healthy, there is no shot he's under 700 yards, in my opinion.
That's the leading receiver. Polk is projected to basically have the same year, 56 for 659 and 4.
So just to put that in perspective, if he stays healthy, which again is obviously a big if, he's a tiny dude, but 697 yards is 41 yards a game. If Polk is projected less than that, that means their two leading receivers will combine for under 80 yards a game.
So
like something has to give in that sense.
Yeah. So
they're not
last
throwing
year
for 150 yards a game.
Yeah. So last year, so Douglas only missed 3 games. He missed
but he didn't play.
He missed
play a lot.
Yeah, he missed week 6, week 13, week 14. Week 1, 7 targets. Weeks 2, 3, 4, and 5, he combined for 10 targets. And then after week 6, he was pretty consistently targeted the rest of the year. He had at least 5. I mean, at the end of the year, he had 3 of his last 4 games, he had 5 targets. But otherwise, he had at least 6 targets after week 6. And he eclipsed 50 yards receiving 4 times.
Yeah.
So
my biggest thing is
for me, it's more of that to me is more of it's a question mark of depends on what kind of role he has in the offense. Because
that's the thing. I think he's going to have a lot bigger role. Like
where do you project?
Really
do you project him to start?
Yes, I project Douglas to be their top clear cut 75 percent minimum snaps per game. Like in going back to last year's, snap percentage.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say that's
so like going back to last year, and why I kind of mentioned it. So after he missed week 6, which I think he missed with a concussion, if I remember right. The first 5 weeks of the season, he had 41, 8, 24, 33, and 13% of snaps. So he wasn't even breaking over 41%. He came back. Then he was at the 62, 77, 83, 72. So, like, for the rest of the year, he kind of pushed up over that number, excluding the games that he missed and excluding week 12, which he had 50 yards receiving anyways, but he played 50% of snaps.
Yeah.
So, like, obviously, combine the fact that he didn't play a lot in the first 5 weeks. He missed 3 games. So that's really basically half the season. You know what I mean? That's 8 games in total that, like, he was either not playing at all or in a limited role. And then combine that with, I think, the offensive quarterback play was truly horrific. And not that Brissett is some superstar stud, but he should certainly be a more consistent option for that team, for this team in 2024. I just, like I said, if the quarterbacks combined throw for 4,000 yards, like, it has to go somewhere. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? So if Polk's not getting it, or if Polk's even gets 1,000 yards, and Hunter Henry gets 700 yards, well, where's the other 2,300 yards going? It's got to go somewhere. And that's optimistic on both of those guys if they go for a total of, I think, 1,700 yards.
Right.
So someone's going to have to get the numbers.
So if you had to guess, how many yards do you think the Patriots threw for last season without looking it up?
3,600.
You would be, I mean, you're wrong, but you're too high.
34.
High.
32. Jesus.
Yeah, it was 3,390. So just under 34. Just under 34.
I say 34, and you give me the too high number.
Hey, you missed it by 8. Too high is too high. Doesn't matter if you missed it by a yard or 100 yards.
Yeah. So again,
I thought I said 32.92. That's why I said you were too high. But yeah, it was 3,392 yards, 16 touchdowns, 21 interceptions. So I mean,
they were awful last, like awful.
So do you think it's safe to say that 608 more yards is a slam dunk?
I mean, I don't want to say 4,000 is a slam dunk, but I would say like 3,800 is a slam dunk. Like,
so, just so you know, 4,000 yards in a season is just over 235 yards a game passing.
Yeah, that's like, I wouldn't say it's a slam dunk 4,000 yards, but I would say around 3,800 is around a slam dunk.
Okay.
Solely because of the factor of this. You said it. You just gave the stat there. 21 interceptions.
Yes, I don't expect them to be that bad this year.
The Patriots might be a bad offense. Like, they might not be an offense that scores a lot of points. They may certainly be in the. I would almost predict that they're going to be in the bottom, 10 to 12 in the league in scoring. But Jacoby Brissett, outside of that bad INT in the preseason, doesn't turn the ball over. He doesn't. He leads the league over the last 5 years, I believe. He's tied with Aaron Rodgers for the lowest interception percentage, not total, obviously, because that would be a whole different conversation. But percentage of his throws that turn into an interception, he is tied with Aaron Rodgers with the lowest percentage in football. That tells you he does not turn over the football. So when we talk about when we were predicting overall what we expect from the Patriots, if we get that version of Brissett, and combine that with the fact that the best version we saw of Brissett in the NFL was with Alex Van Pelt. That's kind of the truth behind it. He was pretty
I don't know if I would agree with that.
I mean, what year was he genuinely, truly, definitely better?
His best season was 2019, when he threw for just under 3,000 yards, 18 touchdowns, and 6 picks.
What did he do with Cleveland? Well, I don't think he played. I don't think he played the whole season that year.
He played 16. He played 16 games, and 11 of which were starts.
Yeah, so I mean that's really what it came down to.
And he had 15. He had 4 more starts in Indy. So in Cleveland, it was the completion percentage was higher, He was 61% in Indy in the 1 year that he was. Well, he had 2 full-time years as a starter. But he completed 64% of his passes in Cleveland compared to 61 in Indy. And then over those 11 starts, he had 2,608 yards, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks.
All right, so let's just say 11.
Let's see. QBR in the Indy season was 52.1. It was 62 in Cleveland, which is so overall, yeah, statistically he probably had a better year in Indy, but it was over 4 more games. So if you were to extrapolate it out, if he had started 15 games for Cleveland, he probably, maybe not necessarily,
efficiency-wise, like on a per-game average, he was better.
And he probably would have had similar touchdown numbers, but he definitely would have had more yards in Cleveland than he did when it was
anyway, so like if you combine all that and, we're obviously branching in a little bit into our overall expectations for the Patriots. If he just doesn't turn the football over and is a serviceable QB, doesn't have to be good, doesn't have to win you games, just a serviceable QB that doesn't lose you football games, the Patriots are going to be a competitive team. That doesn't mean they're going to go 8-8 or 8-9 or, even 7-10. They could easily still be 4-13 and be, a competitive football team. They had 8 losses by 1 score or less last year. 8 losses.
Yep.
So, and we obviously experienced like the 6-0 loss to the Chargers, like 6-0. The 10-3,
10-6 loss to Indy in London. No, Germany.
Yeah, like the 10-7 loss to the Giants, I think.
10-6.
It was something like that. No, because didn't Ryland miss the field goal that game? Wasn't that the game that Ryland missed the field goal in that game?
They lost 10-6 in Germany.
No, I'm talking about versus the Giants.
Oh, the Germany game was against the Colts.
Correct. Let's see. Hold on. I got it. Yeah, they lost 10-7 to the Giants, 6-0 to the Chargers, and 10-6 to the Commanders in 3 games in a row. It went Colts, Giants, Chargers.
Yeah,
defense.
And the week before that, they lost to the Commanders 20-17.
Yeah, they let up 26 points over 3 games and lost all 3. Lost all 3 games. That is next level bad. Like next level horrible offensive play.
They scored, let's see, that's 23. They scored 30 points in 4 games and gave up. They lost 46. The composite score was 46-30.
Yeah. It
over a 4-game span.
Exactly. So, if the offense is just serviceable, which is, again, I know it's a new offense and AVP hasn't called plays in many years, but
you mean
again,
ever?
like no, he called them for a little bit in Buffalo. He was the OC in Buffalo, I believe, like 15 years ago, 10, maybe not that long ago, like 10, 15 years ago. Anyways, I just think he's experienced enough to put the Patriots in a situation where the offense should be serviceable. Combine that with Brissett, who's a veteran, the offense should be serviceable altogether. And if you do that, I think the defense will still be maybe not elite, maybe not as good as last year because they're without Barmore. That being said, they were out without Juden and Gonzalez for most of the year, and Gonzalez is back. But I think that their defense should be good, not elite, but good. And combine a good defense with a serviceable offense, they should be a competitive football team. I think we're both kind of on the same track where I know you mentioned off the air that they're around anyway, like the floor is like 3 wins and the ceiling is like 7. And I think if we both, I think you agreed with me that my prediction is 5 wins. I bet over 5.5, but that was before Judon and Barmore were off this team for the year. So I'm gonna give them both being gone to tick down from 6 wins to 5 wins. In kind of in my book, are you like in the same spot basically for win totals?
Yeah. mean, looking at their schedule, I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, we don't know what's going to happen Sunday with Jamar Chase, and I mean, T. Higgins is doubtful. But Chase is a game time decision. The Bengals are notoriously slow starting teams.
And Chase said that even if he plays, he's likely going to be limited.
Right.
Especially if he doesn't get a new deal, which
Yeah.
might happen, might not.
So, so I think this weekend, I think that last I looked, the spread was 8.5, which feels awfully high considering they may not have their top two offensive weapons, and they took a step back in the running game. I don't know as if they'll win, but this weekend they'll certainly be competitive. But like it's hard to see games where you're like, okay, like that's a solid like situation, right? Like, they've got Tennessee November 3rd, week 9. Possibly they've got the Bears the following week. And then you figure like games at the end of the season, like they play Arizona fresh out of the bye, and who knows what the offense is going to look like at that point. And then you've got the Bills at the end of the season, which might not matter to the Bills, so that might be a win. I'm not
There's
sure.
Also, Seattle next weekend.
I mean, I don't know how much I believe in Anthony Richardson, but that game's week 13. So who knows what that team looks like.
I view next week in Seattle as a very they're home against Seattle, so I think that's a very possible win. I don't know what exactly. I mean, I guess I could tell you what it is. It's a combination of a brand new head coach and a quarterback that I think actually kind of sucks. But I just don't think Seattle's really good. They're continuously the last couple of years been like a middle of the pack, like 7 to 10 wins max, like, and they could be beat on the road coming cross country week 2 early in the season. Like, if there's going to be a game that in terms of chances to win for the Patriots, that certainly has to be in the top 2 or 3 of the year. Looking at it right now, of course.
Yeah. I mean, 2-0 is definitely not out of the question. The problem with the Pats schedule is from week 3 to week 8, like those 7 games in a row are against, at least on paper, elite offensive teams. And you've got probably like maybe 1 or 2 of those games are against a team that don't really have much in the way of a defense. Like the Jets bookend that string of games. So they go to New York week 3 and they're hosting them week 8. So, but then they're at the Jets, at the 49ers, and then they get the Dolphins at home, Texans at home, Jags in London, and then the Jets home out of the London game. Like I would say they're bad, right? But that's like, I look at that and see 0-7 over those 7 weeks.
Certainly. It's one of those things where like statistically they're bound to end up winning one of those.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of 9 weeks, like if they have 2 wins, if they have more than 2 wins after those first 9 games, I would be genuinely surprised.
I would say mildly surprised for me. I think this team can be a competitive football team simply because of Brissett's doesn't lose you games and the defense being solid. I don't expect them to win many games. Like I said, I'm around 5 wins. This Cincy game really kind of throws things in the mix. Like you said, like there is especially if they were happen to go to Cincy and pull the upset tomorrow, on Sunday. Like they're riding high and on a high note into week 2. They could easily start the year 2-0, which if they do that, like it throws a huge wrench into everybody's expectations for the season. They could easily be 0-2, obviously, too. So, like, certainly I'm not predicting 2-0 or anything like that. But, they could easily start 2-0 with them, with the way things are heading for Cincy. Like you said, I think they're 1-7 in September over the last 2 years. combine that with you have Jamar Chase, who even if he plays, looks like he's not going to be a full-time guy. T. Higgins looked like he's out. That leaves what for Joe Burrow? The answer is old
Nothing.
friend Mike Gesicki. It leaves Alex, whatever, you forget his last name, I think with an I or whatever, their slot guy now. It leaves Trent Irwin, who I took for an anytime touchdown parlay that I sent you, solely for that reason, because he's going to have to throw the ball at someone. And it leaves him a solid. I think their O line as a whole is solid now, or at least middle of the pack. And their running game now is, I mean, Zach Moss doesn't scare you. We don't know what really Chase Brown is.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
without those two guys,
Chase and Higgins are the only ones that keep a defensive coordinator up at night.
Yeah, and Joe Burrow is a really good quarterback. He's arguably a top 3 to 5 quarterback in this league. But if you have no Higgins and Chase this weekend, and it's anything can happen. Anything can already happen in week 1 football. So, combine that where you take out the team's 2 best non-quarterback players.
Yeah, because they have so their second wide receiver, their 3 wide receivers listed second. Well, I guess I'll go 2 because their third wide receiver is healthy, which is Andre Iosivas. Never heard of him. They did draft Jermaine Burton, who,
I heard through some reporters online that he was going to have more of a redshirt year, but
I mean, if they don't have Higgins and Chase, they're not going to have. He's going to have to play.
Exactly. So I don't know. We'll see what it is. If Chase and Higgins are both out, I don't even know how you match up the corners. I guess I'm putting Higgins. I'm putting Gonzo on Trent Irwin. I guess I'm putting Marcus Jones inside on whatever his name is. Again, I'm having a mind blank. Their inside slot guy now that replaced Boyd.
Iosivas.
And yeah, and then who would be their other outside guy? Who's their
Burton?
Burton, I guess. Yeah, I guess I would put John Jones on Burton. Something
so the matchups, the matchup that would be if you can score 2 touchdowns, you probably win that game.
Yeah, the over is at 40.5, and I don't think it's moved. It might have adjusted over the last hour or so, but it was 40.5 before Higgins got ruled doubtful and the comments about Chase came out. So if it's still 40.5, I might be taking that under. As I say this, it's probably going to drop to about 39. But I mean, it could be. You could very much win a 17-14 game without, no problem at all. It's still at 40.5. I don't see how. I would be relatively surprised with a Cincy offense that doesn't include Chase and Higgins, that they go up and put 25 to 27 points on the Pats. I think combined with those two out and the fact that offenses typically start slower in the NFL in week 1, I don't know. It turns into a very, very winnable game without them.
It does. Absolutely.
And so, I'm just kind of, maybe I'm just being optimistic and all that type of stuff. Even Felger on Comcast Sportsnet was I would love for them to start 2-0 just to kind of reverse the narrative of this team right now. Anyways, I do want to get back into the accolades. Who is going to be your I guess you could say MVP of the team altogether? And let's use the term most valuable as for what it is, not they just give it to a quarterback now. Who's going to be the most valuable player to the Patriots this season?
I'll go the other side of the ball and say Ramondre. I think with the volatility at the wide receiver position. Obviously, there, the elephant in the room is when does Drake May take over? I think with that, I think that he just got paid, and he's arguably your best player on offense, probably. I think that you're going to need to rely on the running game, and he's going to have to come up big. Obviously, I know they have Gibson for passing downs. He's not much of a between the tackles runner. But I think that with his familiarity in the offense and, the fact that they're going to need to rely on him in some tough situations to get yards because, they don't have the guys to win off the line of scrimmage as wide receivers, Drake May's first game, whatever it might be, they're going to need to rely on Ramondre Stevenson a lot. I think he's primed for a pretty big year offensively. And so I think, given what they're going to need out of him, and I think he's ready for it, I think he's your team MVP.
All right, fair enough. I mean, I think he's going to have a really good year. I have him in multiple fantasy leagues, so I'm really kind of hopeful that he is. I'm going to stay on the offensive side of the ball, and I'm going to go with potentially their best player right now that's active, and that's Michael Onwenu. I think that
another offensive lineman.
Again, like when we talk about what we need from this team this year, in terms of protecting the quarterback and what we expect it to be, Drake May. I almost said Mac Jones. Expecting it to be Drake May sooner rather than later. Onwenu is going to be an incredibly key piece. So, if he comes in, he's healthy for the entire season, whether he's at tackle the whole time or guard, whatever it may be. I think he is the most important piece right now for that team. If Onwenu went down right now, week 1, second drive of the year, Onwenu tears his ACL, they're effed. They're screwed. Like they're so screwed. So everything kind of relies on Onwenu because that you're going to get either elite guard play or good tackle play.
Yeah.
So again, it's that this one for me is a little bit more off of who's the most important player, which would then result in who is the most valuable to what this team is right now. And so that's what I'll go with in terms of another boring pick, Michael Onwenu being the team's MVP this year. Maybe he gets a Pro Bowl at right tackle. That'll be tough to do, but he played pretty solid last year at tackle, so I'm excited to see him there again. And if they can shore up that right side of the line, they'll be in a serviceable spot offensively. I do want to branch into a little bit of a conversation. I'm sure you've seen it online. This whole narrative that has been built around Robert Kraft. This concept that he's cheap, that he doesn't like to spend, that he's been unwilling to spend, that he's handcuffed the Patriots and not let them spend. Obviously, the report that I mentioned earlier came out that Christian Barmore is out for the year and wasn't required to be paid his full salary, but the Patriots are going to pay it regardless. Obviously, again, they didn't have to, so they're doing it, I guess you could say, out of the kindness of their heart, which kind of in many ways transitioned into the conversation on X of Kraft being cheap. We saw the Calvin Ridley talk over the last 6 months in him in free agency. We found out yesterday that the Patriots not only had the highest AAV offer to Brandon Ayuk, but he also had the highest guaranteed offers, which as a whole made their offer significantly stronger than what San Francisco offered him. Where are you kind of on this whole conversation of Kraft being cheap or not? I kind of want to get your whole rundown. Like how truthful do you think it is? And, then I'll obviously give you mine. Where are you at with it all?
So I'll kind of go in reverse order. I mean, I think that recently there's been some harsh criticism of both Mike Reese and Burt Breer on their reporting of this information. And they kind of lashed back against anybody who questioned it, saying like, I'm not just some small beat reporter. Like I cover every team. Like I have legitimate sources. Like this is real, legitimate information. And so I think that when you talk about how true it is, I tend to believe, the Burt Breers and the Mike Reeses of the world there. Obviously Reese is as close to the Patriots as anybody. And Breer, former Pats guy, now obviously big time with Sports Illustrated. I mean, I would say, it's more likely than not that those are accurate numbers. So I would say yes. Like I believe that he's being truthful. When he goes on and says that the offer was somewhere between 80 and 90 million, and that it was well north of 80 million. Like that's obviously a subjective term. Like what defines well north of 80? If it's in between 80 and 90, is it
I would say
86,
minimum
87,
84.
88? And so, who knows? Could it just be like, does somebody think that 82 million is well north of 80 million? Like, I don't know. But
No, I would say it has to be bare minimum 84.
yeah, I'd say
Like
84 to 86 is probably what they did. So, I would say, yeah, like there definitely is truth to it. As far as Kraft goes, I don't think it necessarily defines one way or the other that he is or is not cheap. I mean, historically speaking, the Patriots have not paid players. So, if we're going to throw the blame at Kraft for not paying players over the years and not throw it at Bill, which I think that's a legitimate conversation to have, is whose feet do you really throw that blame at? I don't think this one decision changes whether or not you believe Kraft is cheap, whether you think he is or whether you think he isn't. I mean, obviously, if you don't think it was Kraft and you thought it was Bill, then obviously this helps your case. But if you think that Kraft is to blame for it, I don't think this erases, what are we at? 28 years of ownership from him not being willing to open up the wallet and legitimately pay guys. They chose not to go higher on Calvin Ridley. And the problem is that, they're at a spot now where, this was pre Brandon Ayuk, right? Like we knew like they lost out on the Calvin Ridley sweepstakes because they allegedly offered 22 million a year and Tennessee gave him 23. Combined with other factors, his girlfriend allegedly didn't want to leave the South and Tennessee doesn't have state income tax, yada, yada, yada. But now you have the idea that you have to wrap around your brain is they offered more money in guarantees and more money over the length of a 4-year deal than anybody else that offered Brandon Ayuk a contract during their negotiations, 49ers and the Steelers. I don't know if Cleveland ever formally submitted an offer. I didn't hear anything about numbers, even if they did. But now we have to contend with the fact that Brandon Ayuk turned down the most money he could get to play somewhere else. He wanted to play in San Francisco. That was where he wanted to stay. And even when he was staring at significantly more money, he still said no. Like he wouldn't even entertain calls. Like anytime the Pats called, like they just, obviously metaphor, but like Patriots picked up the phone and called him. He just hung up. He didn't even listen. He didn't even hear him out. So, to an extent, now overpaying for guys doesn't get talent into New England. That's a story for another day, but I think, yes, there's truth to it. And I think that for me, because obviously spending comes down to the owner's willingness to a degree, right? It's the owner's willingness to say, like, here's your budget, go use it. I would say, it's encouraging, but I don't think it necessarily changes the narrative that Kraft has been and continues to be frugal with his money.
fair enough. So for me, like, people like to make comments, I guess, online and think that I'm like, oh, this Kraft like defender and all this. My biggest thing online, especially, is just the bullshit on both sides of things.
Okay.
I'm not saying Kraft is like this fruitful guy that like opened his checkbook and allowed, Belichick to do whatever the hell he wanted at any time with it. Obviously not. My gripe with this whole conversation is pretty simple. First of all, the biggest connection into what caused the Patriots to be a low cash team over the years is, like I said, the biggest connection, not the only connection, but the biggest connection is Belichick did not give out bad contracts. Now you could question why, but he didn't generally give out bad
Yeah,
contracts.
there were always, asterisks and caveats and loopholes for, like it was a Patriots deal, it wasn't a player deal.
Exactly. Within that, they often didn't, like Belichick. He came up. I don't want to say him directly, but he was known for the concept of moving on a year too early instead of too soon. That comes back within the bad contract situations. He knew when it was time to generally move on from a player and not get stuck paying a bad player. And when you can move on, obviously you clear money, you clear cash, you clear cap space. That obviously will lower the cap space. And finally, they didn't put themselves in a scenario where they had a lot of dead cap. He didn't put themselves. Belichick didn't put them in a scenario where they were paying, putting void years on a ton of deals, just to try to stay relevant. Belichick's overall approach was very conservative with how he built the roster. So they put them in a situation where they weren't wasting a lot of money on players that either A, sucked, or B, weren't on the team anymore. And when you talk about, it's obviously not a perfect alignment, but if you look at the top 10 cash spending teams every year, my bet is at least 3 to 4 of them are mediocre at best teams. So, generally what ends up happening, usually a good amount of the teams that are high in cash spending, it's because they have bad contracts. That's what it is. Or they're paying people that aren't on their team. So this conversation that Kraft is super cheap, yeah, like he might be on the cheaper side. Like I'm not even arguing that. But like people need to recognize the truth behind the whole conversation, and it's in large part because Belichick didn't like to overextend himself to players. Second of all, I'll pose the question to you, I guess, in a sense of bringing it up. Why did the Patriots have no problem spending on numerous defensive players over the years, but not offensive? I got people telling me that Kraft won't spend on weapons. Why? Why wouldn't he spend on weapons? So, again, this goes back to Belichick in his decision making kind of played a factor in this. And when we talk about their willingness to pay for actual weapons now compared to the previous years, why did the Patriots always spend defensively but not offensively? You could say that's Brady, right? The Brady effect of not needing to. But
yeah, but I think at the same time, Bill didn't necessarily believe in overextending for skill position players.
I don't think he didn't believe in overextending in general. But
if you think about it, right? Like, he gave Matthew Judon above market value in 2021.
So that kind of goes back to part of the question is,
like Gilmore, he made Gilmore the highest paid cornerback in NFL history at the time.
Exactly. So it goes back to the conversation is, when we talk about weapons specifically and paying for weapons, and I had this conversation with this kid online, is Belichick very clearly, very obviously, felt a lot more comfortable paying for defensive guys because he was more experienced. So this conversation that Kraft wouldn't spend on weapons, he refused to spend on, it's the dumbest conversation out there. 4 years ago, the Patriots went and dropped $15 million to Jonnu Smith, 13 or something million to Hunter Henry, and 11 million to Nelson Aguilar. All of them, Henry was the only one that ended up being decent. Like he's a middle of the pack tight end. Like I like the guy, but he's decent overall. They spent offensively, and
$11 million on Nelson Aguilar is not spending money.
No, but you could have taken that 26 between Jonnu and Aguilar and actually got a stud.
Yeah,
Instead of
right. Yeah. You could have done
instead
that.
of spending it on Jonnu Smith, who when we came here we were optimistic because we thought like he was a little bit untapped potential, but like when he came here he certainly didn't have the numbers to match up with his contract. You were paying for what you thought you could get out of him, and he ended up not producing nearly as much. In fact, he basically sucked here. And again, that's a whole different conversation of what led to that. But again, Belichick was just willing to spend defensively. So when we go into this new era with Elliott Wolf, it's not some coincidence. Robert Kraft didn't just wake up, in March and say, now I'm going to start spending offensively. Now I'm going to care about the offensive side of the ball. The reality is the new person in charge, Elliott Wolf. I can't call him the GM because he's not technically that, but he's just more willing to spend on weapons. It's kind of really that simple. He's been more willing to spend in general.
But I think the Kraft being cheap thing goes deeper than just players. I mean, they're notorious for bringing in members of the coaching staff that don't cost them money or cost them next to nothing.
Well,
so I think if you're going to talk, and I'm not necessarily saying that, like, I think Kraft is a little bit on the cheap side overall statement. And that's rooted in a couple things. One of which is being that you'd be hard pressed to find a very wealthy person who's not cheap, because that's how they get to be wealthy. They don't spend their money frivolously. Obviously they spend, they just do it in intelligent ways, and they do it in a little bit more of a frugal sense. But you look at somebody like Alex Van Pelt. The Patriots are not paying Alex Van Pelt. The Cleveland Browns are, because he got fired. They didn't have to pay Joe Judge. They didn't have to pay Matt Patricia.
To be fair, again, but that kind of goes back to Belichick. Like, Belichick wanted those guys here.
Right, but you can't look past the fact that yes, Bill wanted to bring them back, but they also weren't costing the Patriots a single penny. Well, they cost them something.
Well, yeah,
but 95%
Bill
of their
Belichick
salaries were
was
picked up by other teams. What?
Bill Belichick was costing the Patriots like 6 times as much as Gerard Mayo is right now. There's also that.
Well, Bill Belichick also served 2 positions. You were paying for a head coach / a GM somewhere in the neighborhood of what most NFL teams pay their head coach and their GM combined.
No. Belichick was making like $25 million a year. A good head coach makes like 7.
That's not true at all.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Jim Harbaugh is making 10.
Yes,
and he hasn't been an NFL head coach in 10 years.
Yes, but Jim Harbaugh is a well-known guy. Was a highly touted head coach prospect. The middle, like the new head coaches that have never been a head coach anywhere, they get like $5 to $7 million a year on a good note. And combine that with the GM, Elliott Wolf's not making more than like $5 million this year. So they're combined making probably half of what Belichick made.
So
I'm 90% sure that they make like $5 to $7 million.
Highest paid head coaches in 2024: Andy Reid, $20 million; Sean Payton, $18 million; Jim Harbaugh, $16 million; Sean McVay, $15 million. Like, they're making, like, them combined with their GM sure, but like, Bill Belichick was the best head coach in the NFL for over 2 decades. So yes, the top head coach is going to make $20 million. So yeah, okay, fine. So there's a small handful of guys who them plus their GM equals the rumored salary of Bill Belichick's $25 million. I get that. But Andy Reid makes 20. Let's just, for the sake of argument, say that their GM makes 5. I don't know what the GM salary is of the Kansas City Chiefs. Do you think that Steve Spagnuolo is getting paid chump change? Like, was Eric Bieniemy getting paid? Like, no. So I just think that when you look at it and say, like, the Patriots could have hired the Patriots had opportunities to hire numerous offensive coordinators. Let me rephrase. Patriots had numerous opportunities to hire guys to be the OC who were former passing game coordinators, former offensive coordinators, former whatever. And they ended up signing the 12th guy they interviewed. Who?
Yeah, but hold on. They if we believe what people said or believe the reports, they offered the job to two different guys ahead of Alex Impelt. They just got turned down.
Correct. Right.
There's also the fact you also have to think of the basic fact, and this was obviously just basically last year. Bill Belichick reportedly wanted to bring Patricia back again. It was Robert Kraft that said no. We're bringing in Bill O'Brien again, reportedly.
Yeah.
And there's no way Bill O'Brien came cheap. Like, the dude was in a pretty damn good spot in Alabama. Like, he had no incentive to just like come to New England for dirt cheap money and just to be the OC. So he definitely paid. My guess is O'Brien got at least $4 million last year, at least. Like, he was, you know what I mean, to drag him from Bama, you would have given him at least. I'll give it at least $3 million last year. Probably more would have been my guess. So, like, again, I'm not trying to say Kraft is this whole frugal guy and stuff, but like, there's so many. The narrative's so blown out of proportion when a lot of it was really just Belichick. Belichick didn't, and not saying Belichick didn't want to spend, but Belichick was conservative with his spending because he didn't want bad contracts, which has led to, a lot of sustained success, and that's good, obviously. And then he wanted, he wanted the guys. He brought back Joe Judge. He brought back Josh McDaniels years ago. He brought back Matt Patricia, 5 to 6 years ago, whatever it was. And so, like, that's especially recently. Is that on Kraft? Was Matt Patricia the OC because Kraft refused to spend on an OC after he had just been paying Josh McDaniels the highest OC salary in football? Like, we could talk about that. Josh McDaniels was making $5 million a year here as OC on top of Belichick's salary. So,
right.
like,
$5 million is the top of the market for offensive coordinators.
Exactly. So I don't. It's the whole narrative, and that's why I'm bitching about the whole narrative is blown out of proportion, in my opinion. I don't think that he is this like penny pinching guy that refused to spend, and we're seeing that. And it's still new, and we'll see how things play out over the next year or so. But we're seeing that firsthand now. Bill Belichick's out the door. What's the first thing this team does? They do two things, actually. One, they spend 6 out of 7 draft picks offensively. Never done that in the 20-something years Belichick was here. 2, they make a valid attempt at Calvin Ridley and offer him more than any. I don't know who's been the highest wide receiver under Belichick per year.
Nelson Aguilar at 11.
Yeah, and Juju at 11, I think.
Juju was under 11. Juju was 8.
No, he got the same deal as
Myers. No, he didn't. He got less. It was less. It was 8. The $3 million a year was incentives. Only $8 million a year was guaranteed. Yeah. So yeah, it was worth up to the same amount, but his base salary was only $8 million a year.
Yeah. So again, in a general sense, like, they're clearly willing to spend now, and so if your argument is, it was just Kraft's just now deciding to spend, do you view that as like a valid argument against it? Like, he just woke up this year, and I get, he might be a little bit more motivated to win post Belichick, but like, did he just wake up and decide now we're going to start spending? No, the answer is Wolf is GMing this team, building this team differently. He knows that this team needs weapons, something that this team has needed for the last 10 years, pre and post Brady. And he struck out twice so far, like, definitely. And until he gets it done.
Three times.
Who's the third?
Ridley, Ayuk, and it literally just popped in and out of my head.
As a weapon?
Was DeAndre Hopkins last year?
Last year, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, 2.
Yeah. Again, that was a Belichick refusing to spend. Like,
Well,
the
he
one
wasn't.
thing we
It wasn't. It wasn't. So it was funny. It's because you go back to like the non-bad contract situation. He was willing to pay, to my understanding, not quite as much as what Tennessee offered. But the thing is Tennessee offered him more in a base salary with more guaranteed money, whereas Bill's offer came with caveats, incentives, and bonuses that he had to earn. It was less in
Yeah.
guaranteed. It
So
was
he was
less
cheap.
smaller base and less in guaranteed money. Because he offered, rumored it was like just shy of the Titans offer. The Titans just offered him more in guarantees, which
Yeah,
that was
it
Bill's
was
MO. That was Bill's MO. He didn't
come
want to
here
guarantee too much money and then end up regretting it later.
it was come here and perform and you'll make 12 million a year, or you could go to Tennessee and you're guaranteed 12 million a year, like no matter what happens.
Right.
Like, and that obviously goes, going back to all that, but uh, for Wolf himself, like clearly there's a change with the Patriots approach, and it's something that fans have wanted for decades now. It's that we want weapons, and
Yep.
so I don't want to dive too deep into the whole overall performance of Wolf so far this year. Um, they went into an offseason with their two biggest needs were the weapons and offensive tackle. Both of those positions in free agency sucked. Uh, he has struck out on Ridley, which I'm not necessarily mad about. Like, I like Ridley, I don't love Ridley. So, overextending for him, I wasn't too angry. Ayuk, they went full blow. Like, there's nothing as Patriots fans you could realistically, without being a miserable prick, ask from Elliott Wolf and Robert Kraft than what they did to go get Ayuk. They offered supposedly a second and a third to get him here. They offered him the highest AAV by 2 million a year, which would have equated to $8 million. They offered him guarantees that are probably in the range of bare minimum an extra 8 million up to maybe about 12 million. And so I combine that and what I mentioned
Total?
to you the other what?
You're talking about total guaranteed millions between 8 and 12?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so the 49ers gave him 76. If we say that the Pats gave him 84 bare minimum up to 88, I give it a sweet spot of 76. That's $10 million of straight guaranteed cash. So you could take that 2 million more in AEV that the Pats offered. That just guaranteed money that Ayuk passed up. And on top of that, we combine that with the taxes. California's at 14%, Massachusetts at 9% for millionaires. He passed up another $6 to $8 million. So the Pats offer realistically to Ayuk was like bare minimum $16 million of guaranteed cash to Ayuk.
Right.
So we could go into the conversation. Obviously, what does that mean? It means that the Patriots aren't attractive right now, which again, we get it.
Yeah.
They're building itself back up.
Not earth-shatteringly breaking news.
Exactly. But for what the conversation is now, and is Kraft cheap? Are they willing to spend? The answer is clearly yes. Like the answer is clearly yes. And again, until they complete it, it's all hypothetical talk and not like 100% concrete proven because it's not pen to paper on something yet. But based off of numerous reports, they're willing to spend. So, wrapping it all up with the Kraft conversation is it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to be as strong on that side of the ball in that conversation than people seem to be. We're going to see, in my belief, over the next, I guess, next off season to the following off season, over the next couple off seasons coming, that it's not so much that Kraft is cheap; it's just that the entire overall approach is different.
Yeah.
They're going to be a little bit less conservative, probably, and they're going to be more aggressive towards weapons. The Pats weren't aggressive to go get Matt Judon and Gilmore. Like, they were willing to spend defensively. So, yeah, that's my craft rant for the night.
Yeah, I mean, I see it both ways. Because there's aspects of it that certainly point to the idea that, he could be cheap in some ways, but not in others. I just don't necessarily believe like the other side of the pendulum swings both ways. Where he was like, I gave Bill a blank check. Bill could spend whatever he wanted on whoever he wanted. It was entirely up to him. Like, I don't fully believe that either.
Yeah, I don't think it was. No owners like that. Like, you're giving out a $120 million contract. The owner has to give the okay on that.
Yeah. So, I think it's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. And so it's kind of where we're at.
Yeah. So anyways, the one other Patriots caveat that I wanted to jump into was your kind of final expectations for what you think will happen with Drake May. When do you think that he starts? And it's tough to predict, I guess, if he doesn't start for another couple months or whatever. But what do you expect from him when he comes in?
I would say,
or if he comes in.
So I've gone back and forth on this because we've talked about this a little bit. Historically speaking, Elliott Wolf doesn't rush rookie quarterbacks. Tough to say how much of that is due to need. Because the last two times he was in this position, he had Aaron Rodgers behind Brett Favre, and then for a couple years, he had Jordan Love behind Aaron Rodgers. So there was no need to rush the quarterback through. You had the luxury to let him sit for a little while and then move on to the next guy. So I think it comes down to how much do you think he's going to sit Drake May, knowing that obviously Jacoby Brissett is not anywhere in the same stratosphere as a Favre or a Rodgers. I mean, I think he does play this year. I think that realistically, unless Brissett is injured or playing incredibly poorly, and we've talked about this, I maintain that I don't think May comes in until after the bye week in week 14.
I've battled back and forth, I think, with the final answer. And I said to you the other day that I think it's week 5. I'm going to go with week 9. That's just kind of my gut feeling. I think it's going to be, come week 5, week 6, they're going to sit there and say, they could be 2-2 after 4 weeks. And at that point, like, they may say, like, Brissett's playing decent football. Why, why are we going to shove May in here if we're not even 100%? So I could see them holding out, and that's just kind of what my gut says. I know I've been vocal that I thought he could start week 1, but nevertheless, week 9, I think it's versus the Titans. Post the second Jets week. So you get the Titans on the road, which isn't the most ideal. But then you have, I think it's the Rams and the Colts, I want to say, after that. Is that correct?
It's at the Bears week 10.
Oh, Bears.
And then they host the Rams week 11. I mean, I would say if it's that time of year, I think, the matchup's not as good. But I'd say it's more likely they start him in a team-friendly environment than on the road in Tennessee. Now, granted, Tennessee's not exactly murderer's row of a road game. But on the road, I would say it's more like if you're going to go that early, not that that's that early, it's midway through the season. I would say it's more likely to be week 8 because at least it's a home game. Yes, it's the Jets and they have a solid defense. And the matchup isn't as good, but I think that they'd be more apt to play him at home because of that. If they're not going to do that because of the matchup, then I would say like week 11 is at least a decent spot because the Rams defense isn't nearly what it used to be, and you're at home.
Yeah, I mean, Actually, yeah. I mean, I don't know. Week 11 just seems very late for me. Because like you said, week 11, you get the Rams, then you got the Dolphins on the road, which the Dolphins are a solid team, but it's not like they're like incredibly
But their
scary.
defense isn't that good, and we saw that
Yeah,
last year.
and
When
then
push came to
and
shove,
then you
their defense let them down time and time again.
yeah, and then they host the Colts, and then they go to Arizona, which obviously isn't some type of scary place to play, anyways.
No, but
Um,
that's after the bye. The bye's in between the Colts and Cardinals game.
Correct. Yeah. So it's tough to kind of predict exactly. I think when we'll see them. My gut says week 9 or 11. Um, I'm hoping it's I'm hoping it's week 5 because I think that's the earliest we possibly see him. But if it's week 14, like I want him to get his feet wet to the point where like we have a decent idea of what he's going to be this year. And when we do see him, like I'm expecting, we're going to have high expectations, especially now that he's sitting a little bit longer, and learning the ropes and all that type of stuff. So, we're not going to. It's not like he's starting week 1 and we could see a disaster or very poor play the first few weeks, which we still could,
Yeah.
obviously. But with how things have played out, my expectation is week 9 or week 11. I hope it's week 5, but I don't know. Who knows? Like Brissett, and I know we've kind of talked about this off the air. Is you know if the Patriots are getting their ass kicked by San Francisco against week 4, and it's 30-3 going into the fourth quarter, is Brissett going to stay out there? In most other scenarios, they would put the backup in. Is Brissett
Right.
going to stay out there? Or, vice versa, or if just Brissett is, I don't think he will be because again, he doesn't lose you games typically. If Brissett is just awful, or hell, in a rare occurrence, maybe it's the complete opposite scenario where the Patriots are up, 27-3 against a team in the mid fourth quarter. Are you taking Brissett out? Mayo made the comment that if Brissett went down, it would be May. So, those are the external second tier factors and what could happen in scenarios. Like, do you play them? Like, or do they just stick with Brissett no matter the situation until they
No, I
feel May
mean,
is ready?
okay, so I said week 14 as in he takes over the job. I mean, I think you could very easily see him as early as week 4 when they play the Niners. Because
But that's my question is like if they're down
sorry,
30
well,
to
let me ask you this:
3,
was your question based on when would we see him play in a game, period, no matter what, or take over as the starter?
my question was take over as a starter. But
Okay,
then the second tier conversation is like, we talk about this conversation of if he's ready, when are they going to feel like he's ready? When are they going to put him in? All that. Like if they're down 30-3 against San Francisco, going into the fourth quarter, in any other scenario, the team would pull their starting quarterback.
yeah, I mean,
Are they?
in that situation, I would expect May to see time in the fourth quarter, whether it's the start of the quarter or not. I would expect him to play.
So all right. So you would expect them to.
Yeah, if they're getting blown out, I mean, obviously they're not going to do anything if it's the inverse. If they're blowing a team out at the end, like May's just going to come in and hand the ball off. But if they're getting blown out at the end of the game, then yeah, I think you could absolutely see May come in and sling the ball a little bit.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, I hope it's week 5, but I guess we'll see where it goes. But all right, we'll have a hopefully competitive game on Sunday. They're 8-point dogs. Looks like a decent pick right now if Chase is out and Higgins is out. But we'll be back hopefully sometime mid next week to discuss the Patriots' first game of the season. Maybe they get a win. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah. Any final thoughts? Oh yeah. What's your state your take? Almost forgot about that.
So for me, and it pains me to say this, but because just the other day I would have said the exact opposite. Because somebody asked me, I mean, I guess it was a betting question. If I was a betting man, would I take the Chiefs to three-peat or take the field? Then I would take the field, just because I think that's the smarter move. But considering what we saw last year, it was a quintessential throwback to the old Patriots, like the second dynasty. I guess kind of the first dynasty too, where it wasn't quite their year and they still figured out a way to pull it out. So just given what we saw last year, the fact that there's a couple decent quarterbacks in the way, but I don't really see a team in the AFC that really challenges them yet. I'll say that the Chiefs do what no other team has done in the Super Bowl era, and that is three-peat.
Don't say it.
With their third Super Bowl. I won't pick who they beat, because I think that there's some legitimate teams in the NFC, and I think you can make a compelling argument for a handful of teams to make a legitimate run. But I think, as much as I don't want to say it, I think the Chiefs will three-peat, whatever is it, 6 months from now. Or 5 months from now. 5 months from now.
That will suck.
It would. And I know what the NFL universe was feeling for 20 years while we were basking in the glory of our 20-year reign. Now that the shoe's on the other foot and we're seeing another team do it, I can understand why there's just an inherent hatred towards a team, just because it's like you root against them just because they're good, and you're sick and tired of it. I'm going to be a huge Detroit Lions fan this year. On the NFC side, and just, it's kind of like, you just kind of root for whoever plays Kansas City. Even if it's the Jets or the Giants, as much as that sucks. But that's my take, is that Mahomes will hoist his third consecutive Lombardi trophy in February of 2025.
All right. So I'm on the same track, but good.
I was going to say, which will incorrectly, but will subsequently lead to the conversation that Pat Mahomes is already the greatest quarterback of all time.
I'm not even getting into that conversation.
It is not a valid conversation, but if they three-peat, which means Mahomes will be the first quarterback ever to three-peat, he will have 4 rings in 6 years, which has only ever been done once. And it was Terry Bradshaw in the 1970s with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And he will have, there was a third thing I thought about this the other day. But given that Brady and Belichick never won 3 in a row, they had opportunities to. I think they were more primed to do it the second time around, because they actually got to a third straight Super Bowl. Well, they got to 3 Super Bowls in a row. They just lost the one in the middle. I think they were obviously more primed for a run in those years. And then, of course, 03, 04, 05, albeit 05, brand new offensive coordinator, brand new defensive coordinator. And that was also, they lost Givens and they lost Branch. So the offense looked a lot different in 05. But just because, it just means the Chiefs would have done what no other team, again, in the Super Bowl era has done. Teams have won NFL championships, and the Packers won an NFL championship and then 2 consecutive Super Bowls. It's just the first one was the last NFL championship game. But I think that conversation happens. It's not a legitimate conversation, but because they did something that Brady and Belichick never did,
of course, if he wins his 4th, of course,
people will say that. And I think if he gets his 4th, I think they'll say that at a bare minimum that he usurps everybody but Tom Brady and becomes the second best quarterback of all time.
Possibly. To keep, I'm going to be on the same track, but not that for the Chiefs. I think that the Super Bowl result will be the San Francisco 49ers scoring 31 points and the Baltimore Ravens scoring 27 points. So I'm going with the San Francisco over Baltimore 31-27. I think San Francisco should have won last night. Lamar played horribly in the first half. I think that they get their revenge in the AFC
49ers did not play last night, for the record.
I said Baltimore, didn't I?
No, you said the 49ers.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, Baltimore should have won last night. The Lamar played terribly. I think that they get their revenge from last night and last AFC Championship, and then they go into San Francisco. Well, Mutual Field, but obviously they play against San Francisco, and San Francisco finally gets it done. And once they get it done, boy, is that team going to be looking different in the coming years after they have to pay Brock Purdy, and they're already drastically over the cap. So, they're gonna. This is their window, and I'm optimistic that they get it done. If there's a team that I root for outside of the Patriots, it's generally San Francisco. I don't know. Maybe it's just because Brady grew up there. I started to like them. I really like Jim Harbaugh back in the day when he was there. That might have been it.
Yeah, and they should have and they should have completed the comeback against against the Ravens in that Super Bowl.
Yeah, realistically, they should have beat Kansas City last year. They kind of squawked it away
that's Kyle Shanahan for you. He pukes on his shoes when it matters the most.
Yeah. So, all right. Yeah. So San Francisco over Baltimore, 31-27. If I am right, you're doing the next podcast
in 5.5 months.
a size small yellow child's t-shirt. That
might actually be impossible to put on. It might just look like a scarf. I might.
If that's the exact score and the exact teams that you were doing it, we called it here. All right.
All right. Well, give me a week because I'll create my terms a week from now.
All right. Fair enough. All right. Until next week. Go Pats. Trevor Story's back tomorrow.
Go Pats.
Extend Roman Anthony. Goodbye and take care.
Good night.